Ethan Miller never expected his life to change because of a single conversation. He walked into the apartment that morning carrying the biggest news of his career, heart racing with excitement. A promotion to division head, a salary that could rewrite their future, and a chance to build a life far better than the hectic city grind they were drowning in. But before he could finish the sentence, Lauren cut him off without hesitation. She didn't ask what the opportunity meant, didn't ask how it could help them, didn't even look at him. She only said one cold, final line that froze Ethan where he stood. "I'm not moving to some boring small town, no matter what." In that moment, Ethan felt something crack quietly inside him. A feeling he couldn't name yet, but would soon realize was the beginning of the end. Ethan tried to stay calm, even when Lauren's reaction felt like a slap he never saw coming. He sat down across from her later that evening, determined to give the conversation another chance, hoping maybe she just needed time to process. But the moment he mentioned Ridgeview again, she rolled her eyes as if the word itself was an insult. Ethan explained the numbers clearly, the kind of salary jump most people only dreamed of, a leadership role that could secure their future, and stability that would give them options they had never had. Lauren didn't care. She didn't even pretend to care. She accused him of being selfish, of choosing work over her, of trying to drag her into a life she never asked for. Ethan reminded her gently that they had always talked about planning a stable future, buying a home, maybe starting a family someday. She waved it off like it meant nothing. To her, the city was the only place worth living, and anything outside its borders was a downgrade. Her friends weren't any better. When they gathered for dinner the next night, Ethan hoped maybe someone would give Lauren a different perspective, or at least ask questions before judging. Instead, they laughed at the idea of a small town, calling Ridgeview a retirement village, a place with more cows than people, and the end of anyone's social life. Ethan sat there, stunned at how quickly they dismissed something they knew nothing about. Not one of them asked about the job, the salary, or what the position meant for him. They only talked about how inconvenient it would be for Lauren to leave her favorite coffee shops and weekend brunch spots. When Ethan mentioned that the company was even offering relocation assistance and a large signing bonus, Lauren scoffed and said he was exaggerating to make his dream look better. He wasn't exaggerating. If anything, he was downplaying how big this opportunity really was, because he didn't want her to feel pressured. He only wanted her to consider it. But Lauren shut the door on that possibility every single time. Days passed, and the tension grew sharper. Every attempt Ethan made to communicate turned into an argument that ended the same way. Lauren accusing him of ruining their life, and Ethan wondering when she stopped seeing them as a team. He started noticing small things he once ignored. How she never asked about his work unless it benefited her. How decisions about their future always leaned toward her preferences, her comfort, her image. He realized that every conversation about compromise somehow ended with him giving something up. And now, she expected him to give up the biggest opportunity he had ever earned, without a second of discussion. One night, after another failed attempt to talk, Ethan sat alone in the living room, staring at the offer letter glowing on his laptop screen. It felt like a doorway to a life he desperately wanted, a life he had worked years for, a life that wasn't being taken seriously by the person who was supposed to walk through it with him. And for the first time, he wondered if he would have to walk through it alone. Ethan accepted the job offer on a quiet Thursday morning without telling Lauren. He stared at the confirmation email for a long moment, feeling both relief and a heavy ache settling in his chest. He hadn't wanted it to come to this, but every attempt to include her had been met with hostility, dismissal, or outright mockery. It was the first major life decision he had ever made alone, and the silence that followed felt louder than any argument they had ever had. For the next few days, Ethan acted normally, trying to find the right moment to tell her. But every conversation turned sour the instant he mentioned anything related to the future. Lauren refused to talk about Ridgeview. She refused to hear about the move. She refused, in every possible way, to meet him halfway. So the moment never came. Instead, Ethan packed quietly, a little each night, placing clothes into suitcases and boxing up items he knew she wouldn't notice missing. It felt strange, sneaking pieces of his life away from the apartment they had shared, but he no longer felt like he belonged there. Each packed box was a reminder of how far they had drifted. When moving day arrived, Ethan finally told her the truth. Lauren was scrolling through her phone on the couch when he stood in front of her, keys in hand. He explained that he had accepted the position and would be leaving that afternoon. For a moment, she didn't even react. She just blinked at him as if the words didn't make sense. Then her face twisted, in disbelief and anger. She accused him of betrayal, of making decisions behind her back, of destroying their relationship. Ethan listened quietly, letting her speak, letting the storm fall exactly as he'd expected it would. There was nothing he could say that would change her mind, because she had never tried to understand his. When she finally paused, he simply said he had hoped she would come with him, but he couldn't put his future on hold for someone who refused to talk. Lauren stood up sharply and pointed at the door, her voice rising until it cracked. "If you walk out that door, we're done," she said. Ethan looked at her for a long moment, searching her face for any sign of hesitation, any hint of the partner he once thought he had. But there was nothing. Just pride. Just stubbornness. Just the version of her that had pushed him away for weeks. So he nodded once and walked out, closing the door behind him with a calmness he didn't expect. Outside, the air felt lighter, as if the city had been pressing on his lungs and he could finally breathe again. He loaded the last box into his car, started the engine, and drove toward Ridgeview, toward a life he didn't yet understand but knew he had to choose. He didn't look back. Not once. Ethan arrived in Ridgeview just as the sun was setting behind the hills, painting the sky with deep gold and soft pink. He stepped out of the car and felt a quiet he hadn't experienced in years, a kind of stillness that made the chaos of the past weeks feel distant and unreal. His new house sat on a gentle slope overlooking a stretch of open fields, far bigger than the cramped apartment he'd shared with Lauren. Walking through the front door for the first time, he was surprised by how quickly the place felt like home. The space was bright, clean, and completely his. For the first time in a long time, he felt a spark of excitement instead of dread. The next morning, he drove to the Ridgeview corporate office, expecting something small and outdated, but the building was modern, efficient, and buzzing with activity. People greeted him with genuine warmth, introducing themselves, offering help, and making him feel like he belonged before he'd even settled into his desk. There were no games, no competition masked as friendliness, no silent judgment about titles or status. Just a team ready to work with him. By the end of the first week, Ethan realized how suffocating his old job had been. In Ridgeview, he wasn't just another mid-level employee fighting for recognition. He was the division head, trusted with decisions that mattered, shaping strategy, guiding a department that valued his leadership. The CEO called him into her office on the third day, simply to welcome him in person. She spoke to him like a partner, not a replaceable piece. His schedule shifted from endless meetings and late-night deadlines to efficient planning and real problem-solving. And the salary, $600,000 a year, still felt unreal every time he looked at the numbers on his contract. But it wasn't the money that changed him. It was the peace. Ridgeview wrapped him in a kind of calm he hadn't known he needed. Neighbors dropped by to introduce themselves. A friendly older couple brought homemade pie. A teenager from next door offered to help him move furniture. People here looked each other in the eye when they spoke. They meant what they said. Evenings became his favorite time. He grilled dinner on the back deck, watching the horizon fade into a slow, quiet darkness. He slept better than he had in years, waking up without tension knotted in his spine. On weekends, he explored small cafes, hiking trails, and local shops, realizing that Ridgeview was far from the dull place Lauren had mocked. It had charm, character, and heart, qualities he hadn't appreciated before. Sometimes, when he scrolled past old photos from the city, he felt a strange sense of distance, as if he were looking at someone else's life. The noise, the crowds, the constant urgency, it all felt foreign now. He knew he had made the right choice, not because Lauren pushed him away, but because Ridgeview pulled him toward the version of himself he had forgotten. Each day strengthened the quiet certainty settling inside him. He wasn't starting over. He was finally starting. Ethan had been in Ridgeview for nearly 2 months when everything changed again. He posted a simple update on LinkedIn one morning, nothing dramatic, just a clean line under his name. Division Head, Ridgeview Operations. He didn't think twice about it. He closed the app, grabbed his keys, and headed to work like any other day. But by the time he returned home that evening, his phone was buzzing nonstop. Missed calls, voicemails, messages from numbers he didn't recognize. And all of them came from one person, Lauren. She had finally discovered the truth, that he had really taken the job, that he was thriving, and that Ridgeview wasn't some temporary fantasy he would abandon to crawl back to the city. Her first email was short, clearly written in shock. "I didn't know you were serious. Can we talk?" The next was longer, full of apologies and regret. She said she'd been stressed. She said she hadn't meant the things she said. She said she should have listened, and that she now understood the opportunity he had tried to share with her. Then came another message, softer, almost pleading. She wrote that she missed him, that she wanted to fix things, that she was finally willing to leave the city behind if that's what it took. But the timing felt too perfect, too convenient, almost like she wanted the life he had now, not the man she had pushed away. Ethan read each message slowly, his emotions a mix of disbelief and detachment. He remembered every argument, every dismissal, every time she told him his dreams were inconvenient. And now she suddenly wanted to talk. He didn't respond. Not because he wanted to hurt her, but because he didn't know what to say to someone who only cared after seeing his success. The messages kept coming through the week. Long paragraphs filled with explanations, promises, and declarations about wanting to start over. She mentioned her friends too, saying they didn't realize how serious the promotion was, as if their mockery hadn't cut deep at the time. Ethan closed the messages without replying. The silence felt like clarity. Then, one morning, he got a final email unlike the others. Lauren wrote that she planned to come to Ridgeview in person. She said she needed to see him face to face because some things shouldn't end over distance. Ethan stared at the message for a long moment, feeling the old tension creep back into his chest. He didn't fear seeing her, but he knew it would force him to confront the version of their relationship he had finally escaped. When he stepped outside that evening, the air was cool, and the countryside stretched quietly toward the horizon. Ridgeview didn't judge him. It didn't demand anything. It simply existed, steady, calm, and honest. And for the first time, he realized how different that was from what he had left behind. He knew Lauren would come. He knew she wouldn't give up easily. But he also knew something else, something he hadn't been able to admit until now. Her return wouldn't change the life he had built here. Not anymore. Lauren arrived in Ridgeview on a cloudy Saturday afternoon, stepping out of a rental car as if she had just walked into unfamiliar territory she never believed she would set foot in. Ethan saw her from the front porch, her posture stiff, her expression a mix of hope and fear, and for a moment he wondered how things had reached this point. She walked toward him slowly, clutching her purse like it was a shield. When she finally stopped in front of him, she gave a trembling smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I just want to talk," she said quietly. Ethan nodded and led her inside, though the house felt different with her in it, like her presence stirred a storm that Ridgeview had calmed for months. Lauren looked around, taking in the space with surprise, maybe even envy. "You really built a life here," she murmured. Ethan didn't answer. He didn't need to. They sat in the living room, and she immediately began apologizing. She said she had panicked when he brought up the move. She said she didn't mean to belittle his dreams. She said she had been scared of leaving the city, scared of change, scared of losing control. Ethan listened in silence. Not because he was moved, but because he had spent months replaying these same conversations in his mind. When she finished, she reached for his hand, her voice cracking as she whispered that she wanted another chance. That she loved him. That she would move wherever he needed to be. But Ethan pulled his hand away. He looked her in the eye and spoke calmly, the way he wished he could have months ago. "You didn't care about what this meant for us," he said. "You cared about how it affected your lifestyle, your image, your comfort. I needed a partner, not someone who dismissed everything important to me." Lauren's eyes filled with tears, and she insisted that she had changed. She said seeing his success made her realize what she had lost. And that was the moment Ethan understood everything with absolute clarity. She wanted him now because he had become someone impressive on paper, not because she had suddenly learned how to support him. He took a deep breath and said the words she wasn't prepared to hear. "You're not here because you love me. You're here because you don't want to be the person who lost someone doing better without you." Lauren froze, her expression crumbling. She denied it, but there was a flicker of truth in her eyes, one she couldn't hide. Ethan continued, telling her how Ridgeview had shown him what mutual respect felt like, what peace felt like, and how he couldn't go back to a life built on imbalance. She begged him to reconsider, saying she had told her friends she was fighting for them, saying she was willing to start over. But he shook his head gently. "It shouldn't take losing me for you to value me," he said. Silence filled the room, heavy and final. Lauren stood slowly, wiping her cheeks. She whispered that she had hoped things would be different, that maybe coming here would change his mind. He walked her to the door, not out of obligation but out of closure. When she stepped outside, she looked back at him as if trying to memorize the moment. Then she left, her footsteps fading against the gravel driveway. Ethan remained on the porch long after her car disappeared. The sky above Ridgeview was clearing, and he felt a weight lift from his chest. He didn't feel guilt, or regret, or anger. He felt certainty. The kind of certainty that comes only when you finally recognize your own worth. Lauren didn't disappear after leaving Ridgeview. If anything, her determination sharpened into something desperate and unpredictable. A week after their conversation, Ethan received an email from a law firm in the city, informing him that Lauren intended to pursue financial compensation for their broken engagement. He reread the message twice, unable to believe the extent she was willing to go. He forwarded it to a local attorney recommended by his coworkers, expecting at least a small, stressful battle ahead. But the attorney barely needed 10 minutes to review the documents before shaking his head. "There's nothing here," he said. "You owe her nothing. She has no grounds for a claim." Hearing that should have made Ethan relieved, but instead it left a bitter taste in his mouth. Lauren hadn't just wanted closure. She wanted control, even after everything had ended. When her legal attempt fell apart, she shifted to something far more public. One evening, while Ethan was preparing dinner, a coworker messaged him a link. Lauren had posted a long, dramatic story on social media, claiming that Ethan had financially manipulated her during their relationship, framing herself as a victim of his ambition. She wrote about emotional stress, about feeling abandoned, about being misled. It was a carefully worded narrative, designed to gain sympathy, with just enough ambiguity to make outsiders think something darker had happened. Ethan felt a heavy exhaustion settle over him as he read it, not because the lies hurt him, but because he couldn't understand why she couldn't simply let go. But before he could even consider responding, The comment section took an unexpected turn. People who knew Lauren, friends who had once mocked Ridgeview and sided with her, began calling out the inconsistencies in her story. Some asked why she had refused to talk things through when he first received the job offer. Others mentioned the dinners, where she had openly ridiculed small towns and dismissed Ethan's dreams. A few of her closest friends even revealed screenshots of old messages where Lauren bragged about not needing to compromise in relationships. Her followers turned on her within hours. The post was deleted the next morning, replaced by a vague apology that convinced no one. Ethan didn't reply, didn't post anything, didn't defend himself. He didn't need to. The truth had spoken for itself through people who had once stood beside her. As the days passed, the attempts to contact him slowed, then stopped entirely. No more emails. No more accusations. Just silence. The quiet felt different this time, not peaceful like Ridgeview, but like the final aftermath of a storm that had torn through everything and burned itself out. Ethan realized Lauren hadn't just lost him. She had lost the version of herself she tried so hard to project, the one built on pride, appearance, and control. And he felt a strange mix of sadness and relief. Not for the relationship, but for the person she could have become if she had chosen humility instead of anger. One afternoon, as Ethan sat on his porch watching the wind move through the grass, he understood something important. Her downfall had nothing to do with him. It had everything to do with the choices she made long before he ever moved to Ridgeview. And now, for the first time in years, her choices no longer shaped his life. His future was finally his own. A year passed, and Ethan's life in Ridgeview had grown into something steady and beautiful. His career flourished, earning him respect throughout the company and opportunities he once only dreamed about. He bought a second home near the lake, a quiet retreat he used on weekends to unwind and reset. Somewhere along the way, he met Ava, the town's veterinarian, whose warmth and sincerity grounded him in ways he never expected. They built something simple, honest, and quietly strong. One evening, Ethan received a letter from Lauren's parents. They apologized for everything, admitting they hadn't understood the situation until it was too late. Lauren herself had finally accepted her part in what happened, though she never reached out again. Ethan folded the letter and set it aside, feeling no anger, no resentment, only closure. Standing on his porch, watching the sun dip below the hills, he understood the truth he had earned through pain and distance. When someone shows you who they really are, believe them. And never sacrifice your future for someone unwilling to walk toward it with you.